I never thought I'd find myself sitting alone at a kitchen table that once bustled with laughter and late-night conversations, the clock ticking in sync with the echoes of an empty house. At 71, I figured my days would be spent in tranquility, wrapped in the warmth of routines long established with the woman I thought would be by my side until the end. But life, it seems, had other plans. Margaret and I had been married for over 40 years. We shared everything from the mundane to the monumental, from the first home we bought on a shoestring budget to the cradles of our grandchildren. I thought we shared trust too, a mutual understanding built over decades. Then, without warning, I discovered that while I was planning the rest of our lives together, she was plotting her escape from it. It started subtly, as these things often do. Margaret began talking about a wellness retreat she'd heard of through some friends. At first it seemed innocent enough. She spoke about yoga classes, meditation sessions, and the holistic healing she believed would rejuvenate her soul. I nodded along, thinking it was just another one of those phases, like the pottery class she took up for a month, or the brief vegan stint she tried after a Netflix documentary scared her off meat. However, the discussions about the retreat began to grow more frequent, more insistent. Margaret talked as if this was something she desperately needed, a cure for whatever was ailing her spirit. I didn't understand it then. Maybe I was too complacent, too trusting, too old to suspect that beneath her serene facade there was something more sinister at play. One evening, as I was sorting through mail at the kitchen counter, I noticed an unfamiliar bank statement. My heart skipped a beat as I skimmed through it. Large sums had been withdrawn from our savings, our hard-earned nest egg, the money we'd squirreled away for the twilight years of our life. There were no names, just transactions leading to an account I didn't recognize. Confronting Margaret about it was like stepping into a minefield. She looked at me with those eyes that once conveyed love and now held a flicker of something else. Guilt, maybe, or defiance. Her explanation was rehearsed, the words dripping with an artificial sweetness that felt foreign to my ears. She claimed it was for the retreat, an investment in her well-being. For us, she said, as though her newfound enlightenment would somehow elevate our shared existence. But I wasn't buying it. It wasn't just the money. It was the betrayal, the deceit, the realization that the person I'd shared my life with was capable of such a calculated move. I could feel the anger bubbling inside me, a simmering rage I hadn't felt in years, the kind of anger that makes you question everything you believe to be true. I didn't show it. Not then. Instead, I nodded, feigning understanding while my mind raced a mile a minute. Behind her vague assurances lay a truth I needed to uncover, something lurking beneath the shallow justifications. I began to do my own digging, retracing the transactions, connecting the dots she'd so carelessly left scattered. I knew someone at the bank. I'd helped his father with some legal troubles years ago. It's funny how favors linger over time, like ghosts waiting for their moment to be acknowledged. When I called him up, it wasn't hard to get the information I needed. It turned out that the account Margaret had been transferring money to was in her name, opened only a few months ago. A secret stash, a lifeboat she was building to sail away from me. The knowledge hit me like a sledgehammer, leaving a crater of disbelief where my trust used to be. But with the truth came clarity, and with clarity, a plan. I realized that if Margaret wanted a new beginning, I'd give it to her, but not without consequences. Justice, I decided, was a dish best served cold, and I had the perfect recipe. I didn't confront her immediately. I played my part, kept the peace, and waited. Waited until she was gone to her so-called retreat, the one she didn't realize she wouldn't return from in the way she expected. While she was away, I set things in motion, ensuring that when she came back, the world she knew would have shifted beneath her feet. Perhaps it was petty, vindictive even, but after a lifetime spent playing it straight, I figured it was time to break the rules, just once, and reclaim the life she'd tried to steal from me. The truth was out, and justice was on my side. The day Margaret left for her so-called wellness retreat felt like the beginning of a new chapter, though not the one she anticipated. With her departure, the house fell silent, a vacuum of all the noise and tension that had accumulated over the years. I found myself standing in the hallway, staring at the spot where her suitcase had been, a strange mix of relief and resolve washing over me. Over the next few days, I moved with a quiet determination. Every step I took felt deliberate, every action calculated. I started by consulting with a lawyer, not just any lawyer, but a sharp-witted woman named Lisa, whose reputation for handling contentious divorces was as fierce as her courtroom demeanor. She listened intently as I laid out the situation, her eyes narrowing as she pieced together the betrayal I had been living with. "This is more than just financial betrayal," Lisa said, her pen tapping against her notepad. "It's a calculated plan to upend your life, but we can turn the tables. Let's start with securing your assets." Her words were a balm, soothing the raw edges of my anger. Together, we began the legal process to freeze the joint accounts, ensuring that Margaret couldn't siphon off any more of our savings. It was a small victory, but it fueled my resolve, my quiet rebellion against the life she had tried to orchestrate. The next step was to protect the house, our home, a place that resonated with decades of memories, laughter, and tears, now stood as a battleground. I didn't want to lose it, not to her machinations or anyone else. I worked with Lisa to revise the property deeds, a tedious but necessary task to ensure that Margaret would have no claim to it in the looming divorce proceedings. As the days turned into weeks, I kept up appearances. I spoke to Margaret over the phone, our conversations disjointed and filled with the same rehearsed cheerfulness she had adopted. She told me about the retreat, the people she met, the breakthroughs she experienced. I listened, nodding along to her tales of fabricated enlightenment, while mentally ticking off items on my checklist. Then came the day when Margaret was due to return. I stood by the window, watching the driveway with an inexplicable sense of anticipation. When her car finally pulled in, I felt a strange sense of calm, as if the storm had finally arrived and I was ready to face it head-on. Margaret walked in, her face lit with a sense of serenity that turned to confusion as she noticed the subtle changes around the house, the missing photographs from our last anniversary, the emptied closet that once held her clothes. She looked at me, questions hanging in the air like the unsaid words between us. "I thought," she started, but I cut her off. "Things have changed, Margaret," I said, my voice steady, almost detached. "While you were away finding yourself, I found something too, clarity." Her face blanched, and for a moment I saw the flicker of panic, the unraveling of her well-spun narrative. I handed her a manila envelope, the weight of it heavy between us. "This," I said, "is everything you left behind. The life, the lies, and the empty promises. It's all there along with the papers." She opened it, her hands trembling slightly as she skimmed through the documents. The reality of a divorce, the division of assets, the evidence of her betrayal all laid bare. It was my turn to watch her world tilt off its axis, and though it felt like vindication, it also carried a bittersweet aftertaste. "I never meant for it to end like this," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of her own duplicity. "Neither did I," I replied, a mixture of sadness and relief seeping through my words. "But we can't always plan for the end, can we?" In the days that followed, Margaret moved through the house like a ghost of her former self, packing her things with a silent grace that belied the chaos she had sown. We spoke little, the silence between us a chasm too wide to bridge. As she left for the last time, she turned to me, a final searching look in her eyes, a question, an apology, maybe both. I watched her go, standing in the doorway, the echoes of her footsteps fading into the distance. The house was mine again, a canvas to repaint with new memories, new beginnings. The weight of betrayal still lingered, but with it came a sense of liberation, a hope that maybe, just maybe, the twilight of my years could still be lit with a different kind of light, one not clouded by deceit. With Margaret gone, I found myself at the kitchen table once more. The silence no longer echoed with loneliness, but with possibility. I picked up the phone and called Lisa, ready to step into the next phase of my life, a life reclaimed, rebuilt, and finally, truly my own. The first few days after Margaret left were eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that seeps into your bones and makes you hyper-aware of your own breathing, the creaks of the house, the distant hum of traffic outside. I'd never realized how much space a single person could occupy until she was no longer there to fill it. I spent a lot of time wandering through the rooms, each one a snapshot of different chapters of our life. The living room, with its worn couch and mismatched decor, bore witness to countless arguments and reconciliations. The kitchen, where we'd cooked together so many times, now felt like a stage set for a play that had ended. Despite the absence, or perhaps because of it, I found unexpected comfort in these spaces. I rearranged furniture, repainted walls, slowly reclaiming the house as my own. It was cathartic, transforming the home we had shared into a place that reflected my own tastes and needs. It felt like shedding an old skin, emerging anew. Lisa called one morning, her voice brisk and businesslike. "We've managed to secure most of the assets," she said. "Margaret's lawyers are surprisingly cooperative. Seems they're keen to settle without dragging this into a prolonged battle." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "That's good news. I'm ready to move on, to put this behind me." "Understandable," she replied. "But remember, it's okay to take your time. Healing isn't a race." Her words stayed with me after we hung up. I was eager to move forward, yet there was still a lot to process. Margaret's betrayal had been a slow-burning revelation, each new discovery layered with the complexities of our shared past. Letting go wasn't as simple as signing a few papers and changing the locks. On one particularly restless night, I found myself in the attic, sifting through boxes of old photographs and letters, memories of happier times, moments that now felt tainted by everything that had happened. I stumbled upon our wedding album, the glossy pages filled with smiling faces and promises that had long since faded. As I flipped through the album, I couldn't help but wonder how things had gone so wrong. There was a time when I believed we were untouchable, that our love was enough to weather any storm. But Margaret's actions had shattered that illusion, leaving behind a stark reality. Love, without honesty, is just an empty shell. I decided to keep the album, not as a relic of regret, but as a reminder of what I once valued. As painful as it was, it also stood as a testament to my capacity for love and forgiveness, qualities I hoped to carry into whatever future lay ahead. One afternoon, a week or so after Margaret had left, I received a call from an old friend, Tom, who had heard about the divorce through the grapevine. "Hey, thought I'd check in, see how you're holding up," he said, his voice warm with concern. We arranged to meet for coffee, and seeing him was like breathing in fresh air after being cooped up for too long. We talked for hours, not just about the divorce, but about life in general. It felt good to reconnect, to be reminded that there were people who cared about my well-being. Tom had his own stories of heartbreak and recovery, and hearing them gave me hope. "You're gonna be all right," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "It'll take time, but you'll get there. Just don't lose sight of yourself in the process." His words resonated with me. I'd spent so much energy focusing on the dissolution of my marriage that I'd forgotten about the person I was outside of it. It was time to rediscover who I was, what I wanted. In the following weeks, I threw myself into activities I'd always wanted to pursue, but never had the time for. I took up woodworking, spending hours in the garage, crafting small pieces of furniture that held more value to me than anything store-bought. The rhythmic motion of sanding, the scent of sawdust, it was meditative, grounding me in the present moment. I also started volunteering at a local community center, helping with their after-school program. Working with kids, seeing their unfiltered joy and curiosity, was a balm for my wounded spirit. It reminded me of the simple pleasures in life, the untainted innocence that still existed in the world. Slowly, day by day, I began to feel more like myself. Not the person I'd been before Margaret, but someone new, someone stronger and more resilient. I realized that while the past would always be a part of me, it didn't have to define my future. One morning, as I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun rise over the horizon, I felt a sense of peace that had been elusive for so long. The colors painted across the sky seemed to whisper of new beginnings, of hope and healing. I knew then that I was ready to embrace whatever came next, to open myself up to new experiences and relationships. The betrayal, the pain, it was all a part of my story, but it wasn't the end. It was just a chapter, and the pages ahead were still unwritten. With that realization, I stood up, feeling lighter than I had in years, ready to step forward into the unknown with an open heart and a renewed sense of purpose. The morning routine had subtly shifted since Margaret left. I no longer rushed through breakfast or fumbled with my tie while trying to catch the morning news. Instead, I savored the silence with my cup of coffee, often letting my thoughts drift as the steam curled up into the cool air. One of those mornings, as I was about to leave for work, a letter slid through the mail slot and landed with a soft thud on the floor. It was from Margaret. Seeing her handwriting on the envelope, I hesitated, my heart clenched with the familiar mix of hope and dread that had accompanied every interaction with her since the divorce proceedings began. I debated whether I should read it immediately or let it sit until I felt ready. Curiosity got the better of me. Opening the envelope, I pulled out a single sheet of stationery. Her words were neat, concise, an art she had perfected over the years. She wrote about her intentions to move to Colorado, to start fresh. Part of me felt a sense of relief knowing she'd be far away, a physical distance that might finally allow the emotional one to settle in. But there was more. She mentioned a bank account I wasn't aware of, a hidden stash she had kept aside, admitting it with a touch of remorse. She wanted to make amends, to settle things fairly, as if that could erase the deceit. Reading her words, I felt a familiar anger bubbling up, but it was tempered by an unexpected pity. Margaret, for all her deception, was still trying to navigate her way through this mess, just like I was. Her letter ended with a simple wish that I find happiness, an odd juxtaposition to the turmoil she had introduced into my life. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer, unsure what to do with this new information. Part of me considered ignoring it, letting the past stay buried. But another part of me, the one that craved closure, knew I'd have to address it eventually. At work, I found myself distracted, thoughts of Margaret's letter vying for attention as I went through the motions. I hadn't shared the details of my divorce with many colleagues, but those who knew were supportive in their quiet ways. A lunch invitation here, a quick, "How are you holding up?" there. During lunch, I called Lisa to discuss the letter. She listened patiently, her calm demeanor grounding my racing thoughts. "We can roll this into the financial settlement," she suggested. "Approach it as an asset division. It's good she's being upfront, even if it's a little late." I thanked her, feeling grateful to have someone in my corner who understood the intricacies of both the law and the tangled emotions of divorce. As the day wore on, I realized that Margaret's revelation didn't sting as deeply as I'd anticipated. It was a part of the process, another hurdle on the path to healing. By the time I left the office, I was more resolved than ever to keep moving forward. That evening, I decided to check out a local art exhibition. It was something Margaret and I had enjoyed together, but I refused to let those memories sour my appreciation for art. As I wandered through the gallery, the vivid colors and bold strokes of the paintings seemed to mirror my own tumultuous emotions. Art had always been a refuge, a place where I could lose myself and find clarity at the same time. While studying a particularly striking piece, I struck up a conversation with a woman named Claire. She had a keen eye for detail and a way of looking at the world that was both refreshing and intriguing. We talked about the artwork, our interpretations weaving together in a manner that felt effortless, natural. Claire's presence was a reminder that life continued to offer new chapters, new connections. We exchanged numbers before leaving the gallery, a quiet promise to meet again. As I drove home, I reflected on the strange unpredictability of life. Just when I thought I'd been dealt the final blow, the universe had a way of balancing the scales. Margaret's confession and Claire's unexpected presence both served as reminders that healing was a journey, not a destination. The days that followed were marked by a subtle shift in my outlook. I embraced the small victories, my woodworking projects growing more ambitious, the kids at the community center greeting me with infectious enthusiasm, and the occasional coffee with Tom where we'd joke about our misadventures in life. I met Claire a few more times, each encounter adding a layer of complexity to my evolving sense of self. She was patient, understanding of the baggage I carried, and I appreciated her for it. We weren't rushing into anything, just two people enjoying each other's company and seeing where it might lead. One night, as we sat on a park bench under a canopy of stars, Claire asked me about my past, about Margaret. It was the first time I'd spoken of the divorce to someone outside my immediate circle, and it felt strangely liberating to share my story without fear of judgment. "Sounds like you've been through a lot," she said softly, her hand resting lightly on mine. "But it seems like you're finding your way." Her words were a balm, a recognition of the struggle and growth that had brought me to this point. I nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the journey, painful as it had been. As we parted ways that night, I realized I was no longer haunted by Margaret's betrayal. It was a part of my past, a chapter that had shaped but not defined me. I was ready to embrace the new, to continue exploring who I was becoming, with all the uncertainties and potential that entailed. Standing on my porch, I looked out at the quiet street, the shadows of the trees blending into the night. I felt a sense of peace, a quiet confidence that whatever lay ahead, I was prepared to face it with an open heart and a newfound resilience. The morning light filtered through the curtains, and I woke with a sense of calm that had eluded me for months. It was still early, the world quiet except for the occasional bird call or distant hum of a passing car. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of everything that had happened slowly lift with each breath. It's funny how life has a way of nudging you forward, even when you're not ready. After a quick shower, I headed to the kitchen, where the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee awaited. As I poured myself a cup, I found my thoughts drifting back to the conversation with Claire. Her presence these past few weeks had been an unexpected gift, one that I hadn't anticipated or thought I deserved. Yet there it was, an undeniable connection, a reminder that life goes on even after the roughest storms. I decided to take a walk, my feet carrying me to familiar streets that held both memories and a sense of new beginnings. As I walked, I thought about Margaret's letter, the bank account, and the sense of closure I was inching towards. It was time to finalize things, perhaps meet with my lawyer, and wrap up whatever loose ends remained. Lisa's office was a short drive away, and as I sat across from her later that morning, I was struck by how far I'd come since the early days of the divorce, days filled with anger, confusion, and a profound sense of loss. Now there was clarity, a path forward, even if it wasn't completely laid out yet. "We'll handle the bank account as part of the settlement," Lisa assured me, her voice steady and confident. "It's good that she came clean. We can use this to your advantage." For the first time, discussing financials didn't feel like a chore. It was a necessary step towards reclaiming my life, towards ensuring that I could move forward unencumbered by the past. I nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude for Lisa's unwavering support throughout this whole ordeal. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and paperwork, but there was a lightness to it all, a sense of purpose that had been missing for too long. By the time I returned home, the sun had begun its descent, casting warm golden hues across the sky. I made dinner, something simple but comforting, and settled onto the couch with a book. Reading had always been a solace, a way to escape and lose myself in other worlds. Tonight, though, I found myself reflecting on my own story, how it had unfolded, the unexpected twists and turns, and where it might lead next. Was it possible to truly let go of the past, to embrace whatever the future held without reservation? Claire seemed to think so, and maybe she was right. She'd seen something in me worth exploring, and for the first time, I was beginning to see it too. As the night deepened, I picked up my phone and dialed Claire's number, a quiet anticipation building with each ring. "Hey," she answered, her voice soft and familiar. "Hey," I replied, a smile tugging at my lips. "I was wondering if you'd like to join me for a picnic this weekend. I know a great spot by the lake." I could almost hear her smile through the phone. "I'd love that," she said, her enthusiasm evident. We talked for a while longer, the conversation flowing easily, each word weaving a deeper connection between us. By the time we hung up, I felt a warmth spreading through my chest, a contentment that had been absent for too long. The weekend arrived with clear skies and a gentle breeze, perfect for a picnic by the lake. I packed a basket with sandwiches, fruit, and a bottle of wine, feeling an unfamiliar excitement at the prospect of spending the day with Claire. We met at the park entrance, her eyes lighting up with a mix of amusement and curiosity as she saw the basket in my hand. "You come prepared," she teased, falling into step beside me as we made our way to the lake. The spot I'd chosen was secluded, a quiet expanse of grass overlooking the water, surrounded by trees that offered just the right amount of shade. We spread out a blanket and settled in, the afternoon sun creating a mosaic of light and shadow around us. As we ate and talked, I marveled at how easy it was to be with her, to share this moment without the pressure of expectation or the weight of the past intruding. It felt like a fresh start, a chance to build something new. At one point, Claire leaned back on her elbows, her gaze fixed on the water. "It's beautiful here," she said softly. "Peaceful." "Yeah, it is," I agreed, following her gaze. "I used to come here a lot, back when everything was falling apart. It helped." She turned to look at me, her eyes searching mine. "And now?" "Now it feels different," I admitted, "like a place to begin again." Her smile was gentle, understanding. "I'm glad," she said, reaching for my hand. "I think we could all use a second chance." As we sat there, hand in hand, the breeze carrying the scent of pine and water, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I was ready to embrace that second chance, wherever it might lead. It was time to let go of the anger, the betrayal and the pain, to step into the future with an open heart and a clear mind. And as the sun began to set, casting its golden glow across the lake, I knew that whatever came next, I was ready. As the last hues of sunset faded into a deep indigo, Claire and I packed up the remnants of our picnic. We walked back to the car in comfortable silence, the evening air turning cooler, carrying the promise of change like the first whispers of autumn. I drove her home, the drive punctuated by casual conversation and the shared understanding that hung in the space between us. When I returned to my apartment, the place felt different somehow, warmer, more inviting, like it was no longer just a space to live, but a home I was beginning to reclaim for myself. There were still traces of Margaret everywhere, reminders of a life once shared, photographs, books, and pieces of furniture we had picked out together. But tonight they didn't sting as much. They were simply markers of a past that, while painful, had brought me to this very moment. The evening passed quietly, the weight of the day settling into a gentle fatigue. I flipped through a novel, but my mind kept drifting back to the events that had led me here. Margaret's betrayal had been so complete, an act that ripped through the fabric of our shared life, leaving jagged edges that seemed impossible to mend. Yet the process of untangling myself from the debris had been cathartic, a harsh yet necessary journey to find myself again. It was well past midnight when I finally set the book aside. I lay in bed, listening to the soft hum of the city outside my window, my thoughts a swirling mix of past and potential futures. Somewhere in the back of my mind a question lingered. Had Margaret felt any of this during her affair? Any regret? Or had it all been swept aside by the thrill of something new? Sleep came in fits and starts, and when I finally rose the next morning, the sky was overcast, mirroring the uncertainty that had settled in my chest. I tried to push it aside, focusing instead on the tasks at hand. There was still much to resolve legally, and Lisa had arranged another meeting to discuss the latest developments. Stepping into her office, I felt a familiar mix of apprehension and relief. Each visit here was a step closer to finalizing the divorce, a milestone I both dreaded and welcomed. Lisa was a steady presence, her confidence a reassuring balm against the chaos. "We're making good progress," she said, glancing up from the papers on her desk. "Margaret's cooperation has simplified things considerably. The settlement is almost finalized." I nodded, grateful for her expertise. "I can't wait for this to be over," I admitted. Lisa offered a sympathetic smile. "Closure is important. It'll give you the space you need to move forward." We reviewed the final details, my mind ticking through each point with methodical precision. It was businesslike, detached, and yet every decision carried the weight of a life unraveling. By the end of the meeting, I felt lighter, as if each signature was a step towards freeing myself from the past. Leaving the office, I decided to stop by a cafe I used to frequent. It was one of those tiny places, tucked away from the main street, the kind of spot where the barista knew your name and your order by heart. The familiarity was comforting, a reminder of simpler times. As I sipped my coffee, my phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Her message was light-hearted, a simple inquiry about my day, but it warmed me in a way I hadn't expected. I realized then how much I looked forward to our conversations, her presence a soothing counterpoint to the chaos of the last few months. We exchanged a few messages, her words lifting the fog of uncertainty that had settled over me. It was a reminder that while the past couldn't be rewritten, the future was still a blank page, waiting to be filled with new experiences. That evening, a strange sense of resolve settled over me. I found myself rifling through old boxes, sorting through the physical remnants of a shared life. There were photographs, ticket stubs from trips, and small mementos that spoke of happier times. I hesitated over each one, a silent deliberation over what to keep and what to let go. Some things were easy to part with, others less so. It was an exercise in closure, a tangible way to acknowledge what had been while making space for what could be. Each item I discarded lightened the load, a physical shedding of the past. Claire called later that night, her voice a welcome balm. We talked about everything and nothing, the conversation effortless and grounding. She spoke of her day, of small victories at work, and I listened, grateful for this connection that had blossomed from the ruins. Before we hung up, she paused, her voice taking on a more serious tone. "You seem different," she noted, "more at peace." I considered her words, surprised by the realization that they rang true. "I think I am," I confessed. "It's been a long time coming." Her response was a soft hum of agreement, a shared understanding that was both comforting and affirming. As we said our goodbyes, I felt a quiet anticipation for what lay ahead, a sense that maybe, just maybe, I was finally ready to embrace whatever came next. As I lay in bed, the city quiet outside, I realized that while the road ahead was uncertain, it was also ripe with possibilities. And for the first time in a long while, that uncertainty didn't scare me. It excited me. Whatever the future held, I was ready to face it with an open heart and a clearer mind.